Do you own a home right now? Are you a reluctant landlord?
They've never met a professional tenant, and it costs them literally from $30,000 to over $100,000.
Michael McVety, he's a second generation property manager and landlord for the past 30 years. If I could pay somebody to be an easy button for me. Do you own a home right now, or maybe a mobile park or apartments? Are you quietly suffering because maybe you're a reluctant landlord? And what do I mean by that? Maybe you have multiple properties, maybe you have a single property. Do you realize that if you own a property at all, you are the landlord, as they said in Saturday Night Live? So, Mr. Landlord's here, and we have a fascinating guest expert today to talk to you about being an effective landlord, property manager, and how to do it profitably, how to grow your real estate business to add to your portfolio. Because one of the things maybe holding you back is maybe feeling like you don't have property management licked yet. Well, guess what? Today's guest expert is uniquely qualified to show you how to solve that puzzle once and for all. And he's going to give you some tips on how to be an effective property manager, some of the problems being a property manager, and the simplest solutions to be an effective one. His name is Michael McVety. He's a second generation property manager and landlord for the past 30 years in a booming area, Southwest Florida, where there's all kinds of controversy, all kinds of different things going on. He's a father of three. He's a former teacher, a former hockey coach. He shoots, he scores. And so, Michael, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great, Dan. I'm awesome. How about yourself?
Doing fantastic. Glad you're able to join us, Michael. And you've got a world of wisdom. It's always fascinating in our work with you as a client because there are just so many little intricacies to what you do. So before we get too far into this,
Sure.
I brought it up. I feel anybody that owns any kind of property, a home, apartment, complex, mobile home, in a lot of ways is a property manager, right? So as you view it, like, what do you define is a property manager?
Yeah, right, exactly. So, as soon as you start ownership of something, you're going to be managing it for yourself, right? So if you own a condo, if you own a home, de facto, you are becoming a manager of the property or the property manager for yourself, right? Typically, what a lot of people look at, including yourself, but they look at owning real estate, right? Like nobody typically starts growing up in their 20s and 30s and says, I'm hoping to rent like a small apartment for the rest of my life. And so we get into this ownership of some type of real estate, you start to manage it, and then who knows what happens to job transfer, something like that. And then all of a sudden now you might be entering into how is it that I build wealth or have an asset in real estate. And so that's a little bit of where you start, initially owning something to now you might be going into a totally different era as a property manager.
And what do you see, Michael, are some of the big mistakes that most people make in making that move to, adding properties and becoming a landlord and a property manager? I imagine there's all kinds of crazy stories you've got.
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, the first thing is it depends on the individual. Like a lot of people are try to do it themselves, right? And in some cases, as an individual landlord, you can. Now, I'm a little bit different because when I started to invest in real estate, I was already a property manager. So it was already kind of like my profession. So it was natural for me to say, move from the first home I lived in to say upgrading that home and turning that into a rental property because I had all the tools to do it. And in fact, what's kind of comical is that I haven't managed my own properties in decades because I have other property managers that come to me more as the owner. Okay, so I'm not property managing my own place. I have other property managers that I work with and train. So when you get over the first, like, should I do it myself or not? A lot of people start to do it because they don't really know what they're getting into, right?
Yeah.
And so when they start getting into things, they're like, well, how hard could it be? I collect rent and occasionally they're going to call me for maintenance. Well, they've never met a professional tenant. They've never met some people that could really make their life miserable on them. And the other thing is that for some people, though, they realize right off the get-go that, I don't know, I've got this like spider sense going off that maybe I shouldn't be doing this landlord thing. I should hire a property manager. And that's when they realize, no, I've got a certain path or energy or focus in my own life, and I don't want to get diverted to trying to own real estate and managing that because it's a totally new profession for them.
Yeah, and it's as I hear you describing it, Michael, it seems as though it's like going beyond the DIY mentality, right? So if I own a home, then I get a property. If I've been historically used to fixing up my own home and fixing the electrical, fixing the plumbing, and then I
Sure.
get a home and now I've got a property I'm renting or however, I might be using it, I would fix those things up too, and it's just as easy. And oh, I can also rent it out, and oh, I can fill it, and so it kind of maybe even unintentionally becomes this scope creep that people weren't expecting. And then, like, where do you see that most people suddenly realize, well, it'd probably be a whole lot easier if I just had someone else who's a pro at this do it for me instead of me as an amateur?
Yeah, absolutely. The way I would put it to you is that when you choose to be a landlord yourself, it's almost like setting up a new business. It's like
Mm.
going into business for yourself. So let's just say you're a school teacher and or some other profession and you decide all of a sudden I'm going to get into landlording. Well, you're going to realize very quickly that this is a totally different profession. And so what inevitably starts to happen is for some people, it might not happen right away, but then they kind of realize that either they don't like it or they're in over their head.
Yep.
They might not like it off the start where like, oh man, like I'm trying to fill this vacancy and who do I choose? And this guy seemed nice or this girl seemed nice, but I'm not really sure if they'd be like good renters and they don't have all the tools to start objectively doing that. But then they might find somebody like they go, oh, I met this guy or girl and I checked the back seat of their car and it was clean, so therefore I'm sure they're going to be great tenants and stuff like that. You hear all these kind of myths and stuff like that people do, but then down the road, like say 3 or 4 months into the lease, things start happening. And that's a little bit of the entryway for some people where they call me and they say, Michael, okay, I have this situation. How would you handle it? And depending on the situation, it might be easy to get out of or not easy at all. And they've created a very big issue for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring this up because you're like you're kind of triggering some emotions in me because I had the chance to become a property manager when I was 22 years old.
Oh,
I ended up buying my grandmother's property in the inner city of Detroit, and it was a duplex, and I lived downstairs. And I rented it out to somebody upstairs. And so as you're describing how I filled the renter, I put a little post-it up at this little store down at the end of the corner. And the first person that responded, I was like, oh, it's a couple, they're married, they seem nice, they probably want to be good for their baby. And so I started renting to them. And they were actually very good renters, except one little asterisk. The father happened to be in one of the biggest gangs in the inner city. And so there were some issues, I'll just say. But I remember here I am 22 and, I'm having to fix plumbing and I'm having to there was railings that, going up the stairs that somehow
mhm.
it was some, ruckus got broken off. And so it was up to us, me, the landlord, to fix it. And I had a railing outside and then we had to keep the steps because in the winter, there's snow. And so we had to keep
That's true.
like all this stuff that I was like unprepared for at 22 years old to go, oh my gosh, this is way more than I would ever want anything to do myself. Now, I was in the property as a duplex owner right downstairs. So
Sure.
I was a resident. So some of it was, just tolerable and, easy enough. But some of
Right.
it was like so far over my head. And then, the renter got behind a little bit. And so it's like, squatting and all these things. It's kind of like what you said that jumped out at me and kind of triggered this. How do you know you've got a professional tenant? Unless you're a pro, you don't. And so that's there. And like for me, that was like the biggest mistake is not knowing what I had in tenant and credit and, all these sorts of things, past history, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a big difference. So how does someone become, a professional? Because, here I was an amateur landlord. I was an amateur, property manager. But
Right.
what does it take to become, because this is like, the challenge with the industry is it's such an easy industry to get in because literally at 22 with no experience, no background, I'm a landlord. I'm a property manager. Like there's no special training. I don't have to take any classes. I can just do it. And then, I learned the hard way. There
Sure.
was a bunch of other issues I'm not going to go into, like shootings and some things in the area and, even in the house and stuff. So, but nonetheless, it was quite an experience, I'll just say. So, what happened? How does someone become like a professional property manager landlord?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's funny you say that. Sorry to trigger you and create all kinds
Yeah,
of
no,
previous experiences that happened just a couple of
I
years
don't think
ago.
I've ever talked about this with anyone. So this
And
is
landlording can
awesome.
be very emotional. You're absolutely right. Well, so typically what happens is for most people, they don't start off wanting to be a professional landlord or a professional property manager. So very often there's kind of like two ways that things happen. One is they enter into real estate sales, and then they run into a curious person or type of category of people called investors. And so they sell a property to an investor, and then all of a sudden the investor says, "Hey, Dan, why don't you just manage it for me?" And then they kind of like, "Well, I've had a good experience with the people and stuff like that, and I'll just go ahead and do it." And then you become suddenly puff like you, like a property manager, right? And then for a minority of people, they have already been introduced to property management. Like my father was a property manager. He had set up the company. He had real estate, investment type of thing. And then he kind of trained me to kind of come in. So typically it's almost like there's very few deliberate people that are at the age of, like you're saying, Dan, like age of 10 or 15 are saying, I can't wait to be a property manager, get out of high school and do all this stuff. And then depending on the state you're in, what typically happens is, right, you have to get a real estate license. But here's the kind of comical part of it. In most states that you need to have a real estate license, not all of them, you need to have a real estate license to be a property manager. Some states even have a specific property management license. But like, for instance, here in the state of Florida, you have to have a sales license, but the sales license doesn't teach you basically anything about property management. So
Right.
then that's when you start to say, okay, well, what do I do? Do I join an association like the Realtor Association? Once again, most Realtor associations, they're focused on sales, right? It's a great organization, but they're focused on sales. So then you're like, well, what do I do? And then there's other organizations like national organizations that specifically deal with property management. In my case, since I was second generation, my father, brought me in and taught me a lot of things. But then, as like anything, the industry is always changing. And so then, what he taught me, receive cash in a brown paper bag type of stuff, whatever. All of a sudden, like, you fast forward from the 1980s to today, and people don't do that anymore. So you need like professional peers and an association training to become a true professional property manager.
Now, let's say I have properties, right? Which,
Okay.
my family and I, knock on wood, grateful to have properties, right? And we
Mhm.
have people in those properties. And let's say someone is a real estate investor, right? Which is common for this type of thing. Like, what should someone do before they look, let's say they have apartments or they have multiple properties. Like, what are some of the keys, Michael, to being able to hire an effective property manager, or what should someone be thinking about before hiring a property manager? Maybe those are two separate questions, but I'll let you kind of pick your path.
I'll pick my path, sure. So first of all, what's really important, and you kind of alluded to this before, is that what people don't understand is that property management is actually very difficult. Okay,
Yep.
so it's not, it's not like, oh well, there's like 100,000 of us running around and anybody
Who knew I
type of
was going to
stuff.
get shot at?
Yeah, exactly right. Like you're like, oh wow, like, so yeah, that's just one of the occupational hazards of what we do, right? So typically, I'm pretty fast, but you can try to avoid those types of situations. So, like, just to give you an example of how difficult it is, last year working with you guys, we had a lot of leads, and 30 plus people called us last year that had, so let's say three a month, that had an existing property manager that they didn't like, that whatever reason they didn't like it. So that gives you kind of a little bit of the scope of the issue and the problem. So these are people that said, hey, I don't want to be a landlord, or they reached out, they had somebody for however long, and then it wasn't even working. Okay, so right, not all property managers are the same. And
Yep.
so the biggest area that I would focus on, there's two, but the first and most obvious is, does the property manager focus on property management? Okay. So I've always used this analogy I heard many, many years ago, where property management is like farming and sales is like hunting. And so many people do the hunting sales part, and then they kind of, I'll rent out your home, Dan. And then what happens is it's not their main priority. They're focused on other bigger targets. And then all of a sudden, bad things start to happen. And then bad things really start to happen because they don't have the focus. In addition, along to that focus, is that second area from focus, which is the education, getting better, following industry trends. So if you're not even focused in the first place, you're never going to kind of change how your company does things and become a professional property manager. So
Now,
it's
speaking
that.
of property management, Michael,
Sure.
like, let's say I had multiple, I had 4 or 5 properties, which
Mhm.
we do here in the area, and we were going to bring in a property manager like you.
Right.
Like, I mean, there's a whole scope of things, and I think this is part of the challenge, kind of to your point you just brought up, is the hunter, right,
Right.
versus
And farmer.
the farmer. And but there are different property managers do and specialize in different things. So like what would you recommend somebody look for getting specific on as far as like these are the things that they'll do and also make sure to ask them if they're going to do it. Don't just assume, in an entire package, I think in an entire solution. Like what you provide, what I love about you, I'll just do a little edification here is you provide an options for a total solution,
Right.
right?
Right.
Whereas others, they say they're a total solution, but you're not going to see it in the agreement. A, B, they're going to gloss over it. So you
Right.
think you have a total solution when in reality, it's kind of like what you mentioned. They might manage the property and show up to fix up little things that are going here and there with some asterisks on them, but they're not really going to put renters in it or vice versa.
Mhm.
They'll put renters in it, but they won't necessarily handle the servicing, right? So it's getting
Absolutely.
clarity. So speak to that a little bit of like what
Mhm.
should someone be looking for in a property manager to do for them if they want the total solution like you offer?
Right, yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So, I did a document a little while ago and I thought, and I said, what would I look for in a property manager if I were actually going out of my area? So I'm in
Yep.
Southwest Florida, right, Fort Myers area. But I thought, well, what would I look for if I were looking for a place, say, in Arizona? Like if I bought, doesn't matter, like a duplex or whatever in Arizona, what would I look for? And there were a couple of elements that I looked at. First was the company itself. So the company itself, typically when somebody's looking for a property manager, what they have is a real estate company, not a property management company. What I mean by that is normally you're getting into some franchise where they mostly do sales. So their
Yep.
entire focus as a company is on sales, right? And then from that point on, they go, oh yeah, Michael, I could manage your property in Arizona. But the fact of the matter is that they're not focused on property management at all as a company. And then you kind of say, well, if you are, quote, doing property management as a company, are you like trying to get better as a company in property management, which typically you would find out no. Okay. So there are some people that say, oh, I'm a property management company. They even join an association for property management, but then they don't do anything. And that's
Right.
pretty hard for people to figure it out, right? So that's where, after you look at the company, then you maybe get to the individual. So if I were looking at somebody again in Arizona and I looked at the company, then I'd be, well, okay, well, who's actually going to be looking after my property? And the question then becomes the same thing. Is this guy, Dan, who's going to be looking at my property, actually doing property management full time? Or is this, again, he works building cars during the day, and then at night he might actually go in and do property management? Now, that might sound hysterical, but it's actually true. And that's what people don't understand. And then again, that individual, if they're full time in property management, do they once again themselves look to get accreditation, knowledge, and so forth? And the final point that I would say, and I did this in a checklist, a 5-step checklist, is I would look at it and say, okay, so now that we've found out between the company and the agent who's going to be actually doing it, the property manager, then it becomes the relationship. What does the agreement kind of look like? And I can tell you that there is so much to that property management agreement. It would take another meeting to explain to you how much you can get burned or misaligned with your relationship with a property manager. So all those things are important when choosing somebody.
Yeah, and if I hear you right in layman's terms, Michael, it sounds like property management. I mean, it's almost like a 360-degree
Mhm.
view, right? And they'll like property managers can do all of these things, but just because they call themselves property management doesn't mean they do all of these things. Like, for example,
Right.
they might help you get tenants, for
Mhm.
example, the sales side, but they
Absolutely.
may not come out and review the property, maintain the property, keep the bushes trimmed, keep the grass clean, do any tune-ups that are needed, do any, maintenances that are needed, be on call 24/7, a bunch of the things that like I learned the hard way in my 20s that happen at 2 a.m. in the morning. You get a plumbing
Yes.
leak or something of that nature that pops up out of nowhere, or there's a fight that breaks out on your property or whatever, right?
Exactly.
These weird little things that just are human being things. They're not expected, but you have to expect the unexpected, frankly, in property management, which is probably part of the reason why some people just are like, it's easier to be ignorant than it is to do the unknown and bring someone in. What do you see as the biggest reason, Michael, that most people don't just go ahead and get it to a pro to manage the property for them. I can tell you why I did it, but I'd love to
Yeah.
get your
Well,
viewpoint
we
and talk to
so
thousands of people.
there's probably two main reasons. One is first of all the financial cost.
Yeah.
Like this is kind of simple. I need to make the numbers work. So, how hard can it be? How can I possibly get burned? Right? So that's the first thing. And then I think the second area, which is often not talked about, is as a human being, we don't like making wrong decisions. And so if you're looking, you don't know what to look at for property managers. You type
Yeah.
in something, oh, Fort Myers, and then all of a sudden you'll feel awful if you choose a property manager. Like I said, like another 30 people thought that they were going to get a good experience and they didn't. And then you're really like, not only did I, finally make the decision to go to a property manager, but now I chose wrong. And
Right.
now you're like filled with doubt and sadness and guilt and all that stuff. So I think it's like the financial aspect, and it's not really that hard to how do I even like choose the right person or the right fit that's going to work? Because like I said, property management's hard. It's not like choosing a gasoline station to fill up.
Yeah, and speaking of, like, what are some of the services like that you would like if you were talking to your family member who had some
Mhm.
properties
Sure.
and you said, here are the services you should be looking for from a good property management company, that does this for you. What would some of those services that you would recommend someone looking into making sure to get included in whatever their agreement or contract is?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, yeah, that's a great question, a big question. So, first of all, everybody always looks at, filling the vacancy and tenant
Yeah.
screening and marketing and stuff like that. But, really what we do is almost like everything from A to Z. So, like for us as a professional property manager, we know what we're doing. So, it's not a question of, I would say to you, hey, Dan, like the toilet's not working. What should I do? And
Right.
there are some people that come to us and say, well, I want to be told everything and like, no, you don't, because
No, you don't.
there's only one solution to it. You know what I mean? And so for us, it's about like maintenance and emergency maintenance, and there's a lot that goes into it, like you said. So there's some people like, oh yeah, I do maintenance on the property. Some people do, others don't. They don't have
Right.
the list of vendors. Something goes wrong. Like for instance, we have like probably half a dozen lawn care companies. So depending on where you are, we might use one versus the other. But some other people, they would be like, say yourself, if you're like you were saying up in Detroit and you didn't want to push mow the lawn. So what do you do? Oh, well, I'm going to look for a lawn guy. Well, once again, where do you find that? I mean, I guess you can Google it, but you don't honestly know whether it's going the right way. And then,
Yeah, the trusted relationships. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And so that's a big element to it, right? Because we always focus just on the resident side, but there's also a massive heartache with vendors. And
Yep.
so that's another area of what can possibly go wrong. So then you're talking about like the financial reporting and collecting rent and all that sort of stuff, and or the eviction or legal side of things. And that's the big thing that people don't understand is that they normally go, well, a property manager, how hard is it? You kind of collect rent and occasionally the guy will call you or girl and you do maintenance. That is not what I spend my time doing during the day. It's dealing with professional renters where they're trying to do some weird thing and get out of paying this or not being evicted. Again, I can spend way too much time on those types of things. And those are the things that are going to kill you as a landlord. Like I could give you a couple of examples of literally how people that went to a property manager that they shouldn't have gone to chose a property manager and it cost them literally, I mean, I hate to say this, but anywhere from like 30 to over $100,000, right? So you want to have basically a property manager that takes care of a lot of things if you do want to do it. So if you wanted to do maintenance yourself, Dan, that's great. Well, then maybe, you choose somebody like us to find you a renter. But then you want to have all that, the maintenance, the bookkeeping, the tax reporting at the end of the year, eviction, like legal services, what happens when you have a gang member move into,
Right.
because let me ask you a question. They didn't indicate that on the application, right?
No,
Like
no.
they didn't say like I'm a gang
Nor did I
member.
even think to ask the question
Yeah,
at the time.
I'm being
Even
charged
though
with
I
10
grew up in a rough
crimes.
neighborhood, I didn't go, it was a
Yeah,
younger family. And it was like with a baby, I mean, literally a baby. And I was like, oh, okay, they look safe. That
yeah,
was my
exactly.
criteria for their credit app.
Right.
Like
Hence the back
damaging
seat disclosure.
confession, like being naive
Exactly. And trust me, people
and
have
getting
done
kicked
far,
in the
far worse.
face along the way.
Exactly. So it's really important to have like all those services. And again, some people try to get involved in some part of the process, and that's where again you can make a lot of mistakes. A lot of mistakes.
Yeah, it's like that old adage, what's the cost? For me, like, just again, damaging confession, you just make me think of some of these early mistakes is that, the cost of being an amateur. the cost of not knowing, the cost of, not having a pro in my corner, right? Because this situation that escalated over time is they stopped paying rent. And
Okay.
because I didn't know the illegal eviction process in the area, because, I
Right.
just had never been through that before, I was late on being submitting some paperwork, and because I was a few days late, like
Hmm.
they basically could stay there. It was a couple years before they finally just exited. That I was eating that money every month for the rental property. So if you
Hmm.
don't know, that's not an excuse. And would I have gladly paid a small fraction of the monthly rent to cover myself all the way around, like you're talking, have a full solution? And to take the headaches and to take the mental stress and to take the 2 a.m. calls off my plate. From that perspective, it would have been a hell yes, right? And so as I
Yeah.
hear you, Michael, what you do is you give people options. So they're not, like, it's
Right.
not one size fits all. It sounds like you can
No.
customize it, stair step or like
Sure.
Lego building blocks, what they need, what do they want, what do they need, and customize the fit. And then it sounds like, like what should someone expect, like fees, this sort of thing. Obviously, there's a whole range from small to larger, depending on size and all these sorts of things that I'm sure. But like as I view it and go, okay, if I could pay somebody 10 to 15% even to take
Mhm.
all the headaches and be an easy button for me to handle all this stuff, would it be worth it? For me, that's an easy yes today, hindsight being 2020, knowing what I know, what I went through. But
Sure.
speak to that a little bit. And then I want to give people the ability, as you're watching right now or listening, ideally you're getting some great value here from, and maybe you're laughing at my pain because of me going through this process that Michael is sharing. But we want to give you access to some of Michael's amazing resources that if you're a property manager now, or I'm sorry, in property now, you're an investor now, you have, apartments, you have multiple residentials that you're renting, your Airbnb type of stuff that you're looking to fill and have managed. We're going to, give you an ability to get in touch with Michael to take advantage of. But before we do that, Michael, speak to this pricing thing, and then we'll go to that next piece.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll just kind of answer that generally. Most people think that when they're calling a property manager, they're going to get, first of all, the same level of service, the same level of expertise, and there's going to be this huge variation of pricing. And that's not really correct. So most property managers charge pretty much the same. They might phrase it and market it differently, but literally, it's not like if you set up a management company, Dan, I would be twice as expensive as you, or you would be half as expensive as me. It doesn't work that way. There's normally a standard, like you said, depending on whether you're doing long or short-term rentals. The long, typically is around 10 to maybe like 13 or 14%. It depends.
Done.
Yeah,
Easy
yeah.
button.
Yeah,
Boom.
he's boom, exactly. Like right. So like, and it depends also on your property. Like, is your property like $3,000 a month versus 500? And again, you deal with people that maybe are involved in gangs and stuff like that. So there might be a higher premium for that type of thing. But and some people might not do it, right?
Yeah, it's the
Uh,
PIA factor, the pain in the
exactly.
arse factor. Right, right.
Yeah, exactly. And then typically season was a little bit more like 20 to 25%, or I've heard even higher, depending again on the property, because it's more labor intensive. Like the tenant's in there for a month, and then you got to get people in there and get it ready within a day
Yep.
for somebody else type of stuff. So those are generally speaking. So yeah, it's funny you say that because whenever we talk, it's almost like people are saying, geez, I'm looking at Mike's menu and the prices, and I'm going to look at the next restaurant menu, and it's going to be totally different. Like it's like going from McDonald's to I don't know, like some fancy restaurant. And it's like that's not how property management works. So you're pretty
Yeah.
much pay very similar for everyone. The question is whether you want somebody who's focused and experienced or not.
Now, if someone's got properties, they're an investor, they've got apartments, they've got multiple, residential, locally or nationally, how can people connect with you, Michael, to learn more about, just being, more, having more clarity, having more certainty, having more confidence in this process, and ultimately a blueprint or a template that they can follow to do this right?
Sure. So first of all, the easiest way, depending on their questions, is to email me. I don't know if it's going to be in a link below
Yep,
or
it'll
something
be
like that.
somewhere
Okay.
here in the notes
Somewhere down
down
low. I
below.
can't see it now. It's not me, but sure. So they can email me. It's very easy. It's basically you can go to the website and see me and click on it and email me. And that can open up a different conversation. I mentioned I created a 5-step checklist before. Maybe we can put it in the link, but it's
Yeah, tell them
also
where to go get it. Tell just
sure.
where to go get it right
Sure.
now.
Actually, go to our website, which is Red Fortress EM, short for propertymanagement.com, redfortresspm.com, and then you can look under Fort Myers and it'll be right there. Or you can email me, again, Mike at redfortresspm.com, and then I can send it out to you. So it's a lot of different areas. I've seen it on Facebook and Instagram, I think, as well. And also on our website, we offer it to people because legitimately, Dan, like it doesn't matter even if you're in Florida. What I've said is correct. What people should look for in any state, and I don't want anybody, even if they're not a client of mine, getting burnt in real estate because you can. Shocking but true. You can get burned in real estate. So
Yes, that is so true. And so if you're looking for a way to more easily, more effectively be successful with your real estate property management, then I encourage you to go get Michael's resources checklist right now. You can go to redfortresspm.com. That's redfortresspm.com, or email him, especially if you're in the area in Florida. Email him at mike@redfortress.com. That's mike@redfortresspm.com. And beyond that, if you're local in Florida, in the state, or have properties in the state, and you're looking for an easy button, I encourage you, and I'm biased. Mike's been a client of ours for quite some time, and we have a great partnership. But if
we
you're
do.
looking for the easy button for your properties, reach out to Mike as well. Go to redfortresspm.com or email mike@redfortresspm.com. Now, Mike, what is something I should have asked you that we haven't gotten to yet?
Geez, wow. Well, I could talk a lot about the industry. I could talk a lot about future trends. I think that once again, the biggest thing that I would say to anybody that was a landlord looking at, employing a property manager is that it's really not about the cost. I know that sounds like really bizarre, but it's about how focused that management company is, how long they've been in business, how much resources they put towards the technology that's available today. We spend, I mean, we're a decent sized company, but we spend a huge amount of money every month on technology. So it's not even marketing. I'm not talking about marketing at all. I'm talking about the technology. So it's hard for people to kind of match a similar service to us if they don't have a certain scale and size. So there's a lot going on in the industry. The industry is not staying static. AI is even, affecting us. And you're saying, well, how does AI affect you when you're going to inspect a property? You'd be surprised. And so things are always changing, and I think people really need to be aware of it. And I guess maybe for some people, as a final note, or two final notes, maybe, first of all, like you said before, if you have properties even in Florida or other parts of the United States, I know very good property managers that have been in business like me 20, 30 years. So they can reach out like, hey, I have something in Jacksonville. I know one or two people right off the bat, that I would trust. And the final point I might say to people that have a property manager that maybe they're not happy with for whatever reason, it is not difficult to switch property managers. And typically, if you're not getting the type of results, it's maybe time to get a different property manager. But also, the biggest thing that I found from all the people that were calling is a lack of communication. That the property managers running around, they're busy, they don't maybe have enough tech, or they're not focused on it, or they don't know what they're doing. And again, it's very difficult. So I don't mean to disparage people. It's hard. I know what I'm doing, and it's still hard. So that's when maybe you want to start looking at a different property manager. So hopefully that never happens to anybody, but if we can help you, that'd be great.
Yeah, and if you're looking for a way to have someone who can give you clarity, give you confidence, give you direction, either locally or nationally, I encourage you, reach out to Michael. Go to redfortresspm.com. That's redfortress.com. Email him at mike@redfortresspm.com.
Right.
At the end of the day, do you want to avoid being a story like mine where, I was just, I was hungry, young, doing the best I could. And thankfully, I've learned my hard, painful, expensive lessons. And sometimes the most expensive, you know, property manager is do it yourself, which was me. The next would be having a bad one. The most expensive anything is a bad one. So the most expensive
Right.
property manager is a bad property manager. And so if your properties are not being rented effectively, if you are at risk with your properties with certain liability, or you don't have a full service solution to make sure the property is upkept, maintained, and so on, and give you peace of mind when you lay your head on the pillow at night that
Huge.
like it's taken care of. They got you. I encourage you. Reach out to Mike. He's a wealth of wisdom, a wealth of information on this. Go to redfortresspm.com. That's redfortresspm.com, and email mike@redfortresspm.com. Now, I have a weird personal question, Michael.
Sure.
You and I have talked a lot about your hockey and your sons and
Sure.
some different things like that. How is property management like hockey? I'm just curious.
Well, certainly, I've coached, I've played hockey, not professional, even though originally I'm from Canada. So if people were trying to figure out my accent, it's from there in Montreal. But so I think like running a business is a lot like coaching, where you have different assets and you're always trying to evolve and get the best kind of result. So very much it's like that in hockey, or using another analogy, when you're a hockey player, you're always trying to improve, right? Whether it's
Yep.
your skating or your passing or how you work with the team or the system they have in the team. And it's very similar in property management, where the people that are property managers or maintenance people bring in different, strategies or strengths and weaknesses, and it's working on those elements to make your team, your company the best it can be. So
And
great,
then
great
speaking
question.
of being the best they can be, what are 1 to 3 action steps you hope our viewers and listeners take from our time together today?
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, if you haven't bought real estate yet and you're thinking about it, it's great. But one of the things that we do is that we provide like a free rental estimate for like properties in our area. I mean, I wouldn't do it for like Nashville, Tennessee, because I'm not there and I don't know the local market, right? But so if you wanted to buy some investment properties in that, you could look at going to a realtor. But once again, go more so to a property manager that would actually manage the property, that A, doesn't get paid if you buy the property. It doesn't matter. And B, they know what they're doing, and they would theoretically, know what they're doing, know what it would be rented for, and they would have to deal with all the problems, right? If you have a current real estate portfolio and you're not happy with a property manager, you can always call me and tell me what the issue is. And I can tell you whether it's normal or not. And then because sometimes people say, I don't like my property manager. They've had it for like a day and they haven't rented it out. And you're like, there's nothing wrong with the property manager you have. So it's something like that where I just think that people should understand that not all services are the same. And that, once you get into a situation where you're not happy, there's other alternatives. And before you ever invest in real estate, go to a property manager, make sure that the pro forma is going in the right way, that you're going to get the right investment, not somebody saying you can get $2,000 a month and then you go to an actual property manager that will rent it out and now you're finding out it's 1,600. That can really make, for a bad day. So I would look at those and just get educated, and I'd be happy to help out.
And I encourage you, go check out what Michael's got. He's Michael McVety. I'm Dan Kuschell. Take action with what Michael has shared with you. Go get his checklist. Take advantage of his resources. Go to redfortresspm.com. That's redfortresspm.com. And or if you have a question, reach out to Mike directly at mike@redfortresspm.com. Thanks for watching. Take action. Apply what Michael has shared with you, right? Ask good questions, identify what's really on the menu, and then reaffirm what really is on the menu that a property manager would solve for you. And on top of that, what would it be worth to be able to lay your head on a pillow at night knowing your property was handled and it was a fraction of what you were bringing in, so that it was easier for you and it would allow you to focus on the things that really matter to you, your family, your kids, your spouse, your health, and a whole lot more. If that's important, take action. Reach out to Michael. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you on another episode coming down the pike. Bye for now.